If you'd asked me a few months ago what happiness looked like, I would have pointed right at my own life. 10 years. Life I thought I knew better than anyone. Two amazing kids who made the world brighter just by existing. My mornings were noisy. In the best way, the sound of little feet running across the kitchen floor. The smell of pancakes sizzling in the pan while my wife poured coffee. On weekends, we'd all pile onto the couch for movie nights. Blankets tangled around us, popcorn everywhere. I took pride in being a hands-on dad. I was there for every scraped knee, every parent-teacher meeting, every bedtime story. I loved tucking them in, hearing their sleepy voices mumble, "Love you, Dad," before drifting off. That was my favorite sound in the world. Looking back, maybe there were signs. Little things I pushed aside without much thought. The way my wife sometimes looked away when strangers commented on how much the kids looked like her, but not like me. The rare moments when I'd walk into a room and the conversation would go quiet, only for her to smile a little too quickly and change the subject. But at the time, I chalked it up to nothing. Life felt too good to start picking at threads that might unravel it. I honestly believed we had the kind of family people envy, the kind you see in picture frames at the store. And for a long time, I held on to that belief like it was unshakable truth. I used to think I had fatherhood figured out, not in some perfect Instagram dad way, but in the small, real moments that make it matter. Mornings were my favorite chaos. Wrestling the kids into their jackets for school, hunting for the missing shoe that somehow always vanished right when we needed to leave. I'd tie laces with one hand while holding my coffee in the other, pretending I didn't notice them giggling about my dad knots. Bedtime was my quiet victory lap. The day's noise would fade into whispers, reading one more page of their favorite book, adjusting the blankets so their toes didn't stick out. Sometimes I'd carry one of them in from the car after a late night, their head resting on my shoulder, that warm, heavy weight that made me wish they'd never grow too big for it, and I wasn't doing it alone. Or at least that's what I believed. My wife was my partner in this life. She'd smile in front of friends and family and say, "He's the best dad I know." I'd glow inside, thinking we're a team. We've got this. It didn't matter that I worked late sometimes, or that I gave up certain dreams to make sure our family was secure. I told myself those sacrifices were worth it because I was building something real, at least I thought. I was just another Thursday. Nothing special, nothing unusual. It's the kind of day that slips through the cracks of memory, or at least it would have. If not for what I heard, I'd come home early from work, coffee in hand, ready to surprise. The kids with their favorite snacks. The house was quiet except for faint laughter drifting from the living room. My wife's laughter. I smiled at first, that easy, familiar sound. But then I caught her words. He's the ultimate idiot. Raising his kids for a decade, and he still doesn't know. I froze, literally froze mid-step in the hallway, my coffee trembling in my hand. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. I told myself, "You must have heard wrong. She's talking about someone else. It's a joke. It has to be." But then, another burst of laughter, followed by one of her friends saying, "Girl, you're savage." The air felt heavier. I could hear my own heartbeat loud in my ears, drowning out the rest of their conversation. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. I just stood there, staring at the wall, feeling the heat drain from my face. My first instinct was to walk in, demand an explanation, but something in me hesitated. I don't know if it was fear of the answer or some desperate hope that I was still misunderstanding. The hallway suddenly felt colder, narrower. Even the coffee cup in my hand seemed foreign, like I'd stepped into a version of my life I didn't recognize. That was the moment the world I knew began to crack. I don't even remember how I got back to my car. One second I was in the hallway, coffee still in my hand. The next I was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at nothing. Her words kept looping in my head like a broken recording. Ultimate idiot. Raising his kids. He doesn't know. Over and over, until they didn't even sound like words anymore, just knives. I tried to think logically. Maybe she was talking about a friend's situation. Maybe I misheard. My brain was grasping for anything that could make this less real. But every time I thought of her laugh in that moment, my stomach tightened like a fist. I didn't start. The car? I couldn't. My hands were locked around the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My chest felt heavy, like someone had set a boulder on it. There was this strange ringing in my ears, not loud, but enough to drown out every other sound, and beneath all of it, the betrayal was already creeping in. It wasn't just suspicion. It was the sudden, horrifying possibility that the life I'd built, the family I'd cherished, might be a lie. I sat there for what felt like hours, frozen between wanting to rush back inside and demand the truth and wanting to just peer before I heard another word. That was the start of the spiral. And once you start falling, it's hard to stop. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, smiling in family photos, laughing at birthday parties, kissing me goodnight, and now, all of it felt tainted. I started running the timelines in my head. Birthdays, conception dates, where I was, where she was. I'd never questioned it before. Why would I? I trusted her completely. But now, tiny inconsistencies I'd ignored suddenly stood out like flashing neon signs, like that time she insisted on taking a girls' trip right before our oldest was conceived, or the way she'd sometimes avoid conversations about who the kids looked like. At the time, I thought she was just tired of the topic, and I wasn't so sure. By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit with the doubt. I needed proof. Real proof. Not just overheard words. Not just gut feelings. Proof I could put in front of her and say, "Explain this." I dug through drawers. Flipping through photo albums and old paperwork, I looked at hospital records, insurance forms, anything with dates and details. Every photo I touched, every document I unfolded, carried a weight now. It wasn't nostalgia anymore. It was evidence. The thought crossed my mind. A paternity test. My stomach churned at the idea, but it also felt like the only way to cut through the fog. I wasn't ready to admit it out loud yet, but deep down, I knew I was preparing for an answer I might not survive. When the envelope arrived, it was lighter than I expected, almost insultingly so. 10 years of my life, 10 years of love, trust, and sacrifice. All reduced to a few sheets of paper that barely weighed anything at all. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. The kids were at school. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I remember tracing the edge of the envelope with my thumb, thinking about every bedtime story I'd read, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every time I'd said "I love you" without a second thought. When I finally tore it open, my hands shook. The words were clinical, detached, a string of probabilities and markers. But I only needed to read one line. Probability of paternity. 0%. It was like the world went muffled. I could see the paper in my hand, but it didn't feel real. My breathing slowed, my vision blurred, not from shock, but from the sting of tears I didn't even realize were falling. Numb. That's the only way to describe it. There wasn't rage yet, not even heartbreak in the way I expected. Just this hollow ache in my chest, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made me 10 years. And now, every moment I thought was mine belonged to someone else. I sat there until the sun shifted across the kitchen floor, the paper still trembling in my hand. I didn't know whether to scream or to simply vanish. I didn't rush to her with the papers in my hand. I waited, not out of mercy, but because I wanted her to see it in my eyes before she heard it in my voice. That evening, she walked into the kitchen like it was any other day. I was leaning against the counter, the test results folded neatly on the table between us. She glanced at them, then at me, and I saw it, that flicker of recognition. Her face tightened before I even said a word. "Do you want to explain this?" My voice was calm, the kind of calm that makes people uneasy. She sighed like I'd just brought up something trivial, and muttered, "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. Not what I think. It says 0%. That's not exactly open to interpretation. She started pacing, tossing out excuses like darts in the dark that it was complicated. It was a mistake that I'd still been. A great father, so it shouldn't matter. She tried to tell me biology didn't define family. And in some twisted way, maybe she believed that. But every word felt like gasoline on the fire building inside me. You had 10 years to tell me, I said, my voice tightening. 10 years, to be honest. Ted, you stood there and called me the ultimate idiot for raising his kids. 10 years. And you laughed about it. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing left to throw at me. Just silence. In that silence, my heartbreak solidified into something colder. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't breaking down. I was done. If this were just between her and me, I could walk away without looking back. But it wasn't. It never was. Because in the middle of all this betrayal, there were two little faces who had no idea their world was about to tilt. And the cruelest part, I still loved them. Every bit as much as I did before those papers landed. In my hands, that night, I found them in the living room, sprawled out on the floor with coloring books and crayons. They looked up and grinned like nothing was wrong. Like their dad, the man they believed in, hadn't just had the ground ripped out from under him. I dropped to my knees, pulling them both into my arms. They giggled, wriggling against me, asking why I was hugging them so tight. I told them I just missed them. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Inside, I was choking on the thought that these moments were numbered. That one day soon, I might not be the one who tucks them in or cheers from the sidelines. I'd been their father in every way that mattered, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every whispered I love you. But biology has a way of crashing into the heart, and now. I didn't know if I was strong enough to keep standing in this lie. Every smile I gave them that night felt like it had to hide the cracks inside me. They didn't deserve to see me break. Not yet. There's a certain kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. The kind that presses on your chest, makes the air thick, and dares you to take that first step out the door. That was the silence in our house the day I decided to leave. No shouting, no slamming doors, just the sound of a suitcase zipper and my own heartbeat. I'd made up my mind. I couldn't be her husband anymore. The trust was gone, the foundation shattered beyond repair. But the kids were a different story. I wouldn't vanish from their lives. Couldn't. Whether the blood in their veins matched mine, didn't erase the fact that I'd raised them, that I loved them. As I moved through the house, I found myself pausing at each doorway. The kitchen where I'd burned pancakes trying to surprise them with breakfast. The hallway where little socks and toy cars used to scatter like confetti. Our bedroom, once a place of closeness, now a museum of lies. I stopped at the family. Photos on the wall, smiles frozen in time. A perfect picture. If you didn't know the truth, my hand lingered on the frame. For a second, I wanted to smash it. Instead, I left it hanging. It wasn't just my memory. It was theirs too. When I finally rolled my suitcase to the door, I took one last look over my shoulder. No dramatic goodbye, no final words to her. Just the quiet decision that this chapter was closed. People talk about fatherhood like it's something written in your DNA. But after everything, I've learned it's not. It's written in bedtime stories, scraped knee bandages, the way little arms wrap around you when the world feels too big. The truth about their paternity had the power to break me. And for a while it did. But in the middle of all that hurt, I kept coming back to the same question. Were they any less my kids yesterday, before I knew? The answer was always no. So I made my choice. I'm still dad. Maybe not in the way a lab test defines it, but in the way they see me when I walk through the door. I'm the man who taught them how to ride a bike, the one they run to when they're scared of thunderstorms. That's not something a piece of paper can erase. I keep my distance from her now, our lives only crossing where the kids are concerned. It's not easy. Sometimes I see her smile and remember what I thought we had, and it twists in my chest. But then I hear the kids laughing, and it untangles everything. They're my compass now. One day they'll be old enough to know the truth. When that moment comes, I'll be ready to tell them, not with bitterness, but with honesty.
Oh,
Make sure they understand family isn't always about where you come from. It's about who shows up.